morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're sorry about a little bit of technical difficulty. Welcome to Wake Up with Women's Council North Central. I'm Kat Timpson. And before we get started, I just wanted to give an opportunity to our strategic partner, Dan Sturba, to tell you a little bit about what's going on and what he does, and then we will get right to our program. Hi, Dan. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Well.
So I'm the Vice President of LCD Commercial Lending. We basically do anything that is commercial related, whether it's your single family investments all the way up to golf courses, churches, or anything of that nature. We are currently seeing a lot of inquiries for the Airbnb market. We do have financing for Airbnb, the VRBO, anything along those lines. We are also starting to see a little bit of an uptake with SBA, with a lot of people that are now starting to get back into opening their own businesses. We are also able to do pretty much any business loan, business lines of credit, and we're able to do all of this lending pretty much in every state throughout the U.S. So it doesn't have to necessarily be New Jersey. We have written business all over the U.S., so we could do this for you guys pretty much anywhere. So if you knew somebody out in Colorado, let's say, yes, we have written in Colorado before. So a lot of options, a lot of different ways of doing this. The last point that I would like to make is we're starting to see on the residential market that the pricing in the way of a rate for investment properties and second homes is now starting to exceed what you would be able to get on a commercial loan for a interest rate. So if you're starting to see a lot of people who are looking to get into the investment game, this is definitely going to be a better way to go, because we're now talking almost a whole percentage point more on the residential side than we are on the commercial side.
Thank you, Dan. We really appreciate that. I specialize in investments, so that's why I'm so happy you're one of our strap partners. Thank you. So this morning, I am really pleased and honored to have a good friend of mine who is both a friend and a mentor. We met online through an online media class. This is Ariel D. Smith, who is an author, scholar, and founder of the Food Truck Scholar. Stay with me. As a PhD candidate at Purdue University, Ariel's research focuses specifically on the experience of Black food truck owners in the mobile food space. She's the executive producer of the Food Truck Scholar podcast, which invites guests from various backgrounds, identities, regions, and fields to discuss their role in the food truck movement. Welcome, Ariel. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, the minute you and I met, so taken with your interest and how you took it and you use it for both your academic and your profit career. Could you tell us a little bit about the journey of how you became the Food Truck Scholar?
Whenever someone asks me that, I tell them, hey, I'm eating my way to a PhD, and it is a true thing. So this all started as a moment of hunger. I had just moved to West Lafayette, Indiana, Boiler Up, and it was a very different landscape from any other space I had lived in. I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama. We're 74. There we go. Southern all day. 74% Black. The food scene is very, very different from what I experienced in the Midwest and in Indiana. So was a little homesick. And to add insult to injury, all of my friends back home are posting these new Black-owned food trucks that are popping up in Birmingham after I leave. So I became jealous and hangry and wanted to know, why are these food trucks emerging after I leave? Is this related to gentrification? Is this related to what other phenomenon? And I started researching it, and there was no one speaking about that topic. Coincidentally, my professor said I need to write my midterm paper that I had not started at all. And I wasn't feeling bad because no one else in my cohort had either. And he said, don't be intimidated by the fact that you think whatever you write today as a first year has to be your dissertation. It does not. Write an 8 to 10 page paper about a question that is on your mind. The question that was on my mind is, why are all these Black-owned food trucks popping up in Birmingham after I...
Oops, thank you. Sorry about that.
It's fine. So the question that was on my mind at the time is, what is happening to Birmingham and all these Black-owned food trucks. Wrote my paper on that, got an A, and I was like, you know what? We're going to stick with this. We're going to eat our way to a PhD. And that is exactly what I've done.
I love it. I love it. Get the A and go with that. That was my theory. So, Eric, you create simple, impactful resources to help current and inspiring entrepreneurs succeed in the food truck industry. Can you tell us some of the things you do to help them out?
Absolutely. So the flagship thing that we've started was the podcast. And that was created because of the fact that it's one thing to do scholarship on it. I am the only scholar that focuses specifically on Black-owned food trucks. But when you look at the Academy, how many people have access to those databases? How many people have access to those articles? And how many times are those articles creating content that can directly benefit food truck owners? So I created the podcast as a way to bridge that gap, to take some of what I'm learning academically, some of the things that I'm studying in the news and latest trends, as well as bringing in the stories of food trucks that we often miss into one space. So we started with the podcast. We had YouTube in 2018. We shifted to focusing on the podcast in 2019. But then last year, I came out with, well, let me back up. I actually did a Black food entrepreneurship webinar in 2020. In the height of the pandemic, because one thing that we do know is that while many businesses suffered across the board, Black businesses, and more specifically, Black businesses in the food and beverage sector suffered greatly. So I partnered with Eat Okra. It's an app that helps you find Black-owned food trucks and restaurants. And we did a 3-part webinar series that covered menu creation, online delivery, how to really basically pivot your business in the midst of 2021. And we opened that to everyone. And then last year, I released my first book, which is Before You Launch a Food Truck, 8 Questions Every Aspiring Food Trucker Should Ask. And what I'm very passionate about is I want it to not just be a book you read, I want it to be a book that calls you to take action. So in each section of this book is actually places where you can take notes. That way, once you're done with this, you have a plan of how to just not only get rolling, but keep trucking. I'm all about don't just read it, do it.
That's awesome. Because you know what? It's like the tasks that keep you going. We know that in real estate, you have to know where you're going, but you also there are always Bibles, if you will, for what you've got. And that somebody's going to own that. It's going to be ragtagged by the end of it because they're going to have written so many notes. That's awesome. So can I go back, Ariel? You do this podcast. I know you and I have talked a lot about it. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into the podcast part, what inspired you for that? And then sort of a little bit about what's gone on with that journey. And then we can come back, maybe give us a few tips.
I love this question. So it really came about as terms of sustainability. So at first I started by going to in-person. The very first place was Peoria, Illinois. I had an undergrad student with me and we filmed it on location. It was a mess in so many ways, but it's still on YouTube. It started.
Check it out to make sure.
Yeah, it was like a guy that decided to use his lawnmower at the precise time that we're recording. So there's that. But we went from that and I realized, I can't travel to every place and record and teach and be a student and do all the other things. So we went into Instagram Live. And then I realized, there's some challenges with that too, because, logistical things can happen, technical issues, and it's happening live. What can I do that engages in the conversation, but I don't necessarily have all the pressures of doing things live if I need to reschedule or if their video isn't great? What can I do? And that became podcasting. Prior to the Food Truck Scholar, I will admit, I really didn't listen to a lot of podcasts. I taught myself how to podcast. And now I'm in a place where I teach undergraduate students that had a course that I never had how to podcast, and I coach individuals on how to do that. So I spent a lot of time digesting the content. I ate, think, and breathed podcasting for about a good amount of weeks every day. But then there came a point where when it was time to release it, to be honest with you, Kat, I was scared. I was scared of, would anyone listen to this? Would food trucks sign up to this? did I have the voice for it? Because every time I would research the content, I didn't see people who looked like me teaching how to podcast. So did I have the right look? Did I have the right voice? Was my voice too Southern? All of those things became a part of that hesitation, but we stepped forward, we pushed through, and now we're in 94 countries worldwide. It's been a lot of fun to do, and we're now going into our 4th season next month. So I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah, we're going to round back to that. I just want to reiterate, it's called the Food Truck Scholar Podcast. So
Yeah.
guys, check it out. It's amazing. And we'll have a link to it when we post this. But so Eric, you know this backwards and forwards by now. If you were one of us who's aspiring to do something in the podcast world, what might a few tips, maybe like your top 3 tips, be for us to get going?
Number one, be genuine. So a lot of podcasters, and I know that sounds cheesy, but a lot of podcasters come out there and they think immediately that I'm going to do this to make money, or I'm going to do this to get clients. Now, let's be clear. I have monetized my podcast and I do have clients from that, but that's not the core of what makes my community so distinct and unique. I have people that have stopped listening to other food truck podcasts and now exclusively listen to mine, or they have now added me to the template. Why? Because I have built a community around my show. I'm very clear about I'm here to support you. It's even to a point now where I'm actually working with a food truck. I started their GoFundMe to help them keep moving in the midst of the pandemic, because they've had a lot hit them recently. They know that at the end of the day, yes, I got products. Yes, I got services, but I care. I showed that first. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's number one.
Awesome. Do all you realtors out there hear this, right? This is so apropos for us. We are service providers, so I love that. Please continue. This is great.
The next thing is, create services that build a community. So we started with Instagram Lives. We put that on YouTube. Then we went into the podcast. Then we started doing webinar events. Then we started partnering with other people in the food truck industry that was app providers. Then we started bringing in people from food truck builders to be on the show. Now we've done the book. We just relaunched Keep Trucking University. That will be our one-stop shop for courses. I'm in the process now to pitch for a grant so that we can release our app. And our app is going to be like something that we've never seen for the food truck industry. So think about how you can build a community around what your followers and listeners need. But then the third and most important thing that I would say is do it for the one. So right now, as we're ending Black History Month, I'm waiting for a text. I've just signed the contract. Ebony Magazine, for those who don't know, that is the oldest Black magazine for Black history and culture and life in itself, is streaming some of my YouTube content to close out Black History Month. Do I have thousands of followers on YouTube? No. But because I did it for the one, someone took note of that and they said, hey, I think this is content that'll be really good for Ebony in this moment. I had a Instagram Live, and only 4 people tuned into that live when I first started. Only 1 person stayed throughout. By the end of that talk, he immediately inboxed me and said, you have no idea how much I resonated with that. His story was just like mine. I needed to hear that. And in that moment, it changed how I thought. This was back in 2018. It changed how I thought because I was upset that I didn't have 30 or 40 people on the live, that only 4 came, only 1 stayed. But that one that stayed was the one that needed to hear it. So if you can do it for the 1, you can easily do it for the 100, you can do it for the 1,000,000.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. We always say you just need one buyer, buyer or 1 seller, so it's a 1 for us too. That's amazing. And you guys, can you see why we have Ariel? She's done unbelievably in the past 4 years, and you've just grown. But it's so obvious that you've done it both exponentially, but you've done it so naturally and genuinely. So with the goal of getting more information and helping people. Thank you for that. That's fantastic. I know you were named a top 15 Black culinary trailblazer in 2021 by Time Out magazine. And you've also been featured and highlighted, as you said, in some other national media, including Cuisine Noir, Rethink Food, Yahoo News, Black News Channel, and Ebony. So can you just tell us a little bit about how self-promotion has worked for you, or how you've sort of flipped that switch into getting more of comfortable with promoting yourself?
Yeah, and here's the thing. I've been blessed that all of that has come my way, and I've never once paid for an ad for any of that. So last time I did an ad is when I started my Instagram lives in 2018. But when the podcast came out, I was like, we don't have no money. So we didn't promote anything. So all of that is organic. One of the things that's been really helpful is, you just put yourself out there. You don't have to do it in an annoying way that feels spammy, but just consistently create content. You don't have to be the person that says, hey, just circling back over and over again. Notice you didn't open my email. You don't have to be that person. Or maybe you do if it's real estate. I'm not sure. But in my space, I don't know. But in my space, what I do is just consistently, whether you engage or not, I'm going to keep putting out my content. I'm not worried about, only 0.9% of people engage. I'm just making up a number. Engage with this post. That don't care. I'm just going to create my content. I'm going to create value every time I post. You're going to know that I'm doing something. You're going to see when I'm featured. Like there was, I think Coalition for Equity or something like that in New Jersey recognized me last Saturday. I put it in my Instagram stories. I'm going to go back this weekend and say, hey, thank you so much, so-and-so, for featuring me, so that people constantly see that there are other organizations that's, recognizing what I do. When we get off this call, I'm going to say, hey, thank you so much for the Women Council of Realtors in North Central New Jersey for inviting me this morning to speak. I really appreciated it, so that they can see no matter where I am, I'm creating value and content. I hope I'm creating value and content for y'all today.
Yes. And Ariel, what's really coming through, and just to reiterate, your authenticity, your curiosity, and your interest in doing this for others, your service. This is like such incredible information. So before we get to one other thing that I think we do have a few minutes for, we have something called rapid fire. And I wonder if you'll engage with us in that.
Okay.
We'll make it around your stuff. So that's kind of cool.
All right.
Okay, so ready? 1 or 2 sentences for all the answers. First, what's your favorite food truck food?
Peach stuffed beignets at the Beignet Bar in Nashville, Tennessee.
What do they serve?
Nothing but beignets.
Beignet, yes, nice. Who's your favorite podcast guest so far, and why?
Patrick Lanier. I'm actually working with him now. He has a story of just redemption, of being formerly incarcerated and now using that food truck to give back to others.
Oh, that's so interesting, right? So what do? You're about to go on air. Even though you're not doing this live, do you have a trick for either calming yourself, centering yourself, or being ready to focus on your guest or guests?
Remember, it's not about me.
Love it. Favorite podcast other than your own, even though you didn't start listening to other podcasts, but do you have one that you are listening to, or a few that are your favorite?
Yes, number 1, Fatness Fiction, started by another PhD student named Elise Smith. Talks about bigger bodies in the industry, especially women of color, but not exclusively women of color. And the second one is, I think it's Your First Million by Arlen Hamilton.
Nice. You guys got that? We'll tag that in the notes as well. We're realtors, so we just want to know, do you have a house to buy or sell, Air?
I like to buy a house. I would like to buy a house.
Ariel and I have talked about doing investments, so I'm going to be her investment guru since she's been our self-promotion guru. So we have a few more minutes, Eric. I wanted to ask you, we're celebrating Black History Month this month, and I wanted to touch on something that you're involved in that relates to that. Can you tell us a little bit about Redreamer?
Yes. So as if I wasn't already busy, I created other brands, and Redreamer is one of them. That is my lifestyle brand. It's more than just clothes, but its whole mission is inspiring people to pick up a dream they once left behind. everybody may not be a homeowner or buyer just yet, but everybody has had a dream at some point. And at one point or another, keep living if you haven't experienced this just yet. You may have had a dream that didn't work out how you thought. And because it didn't work out how you thought, you may have had the hesitancy or the fear to step out and dream again. Maybe you had a house that you thought that you was going to sell and it was going to be gone like that, and it fell through in escrow. Maybe that something like that happened and you was like, man, I don't think this real estate thing is for me. But it is. You just have to be able to pick up the courage to pick that dream up again and go forth with that. So that is what that lifestyle brand is about. Every time you see a hoodie, I was going to wear one today, but every time you see it, it's going to have something about dreaming again. Being brave enough to pick that back up again, having the courage to step forward. But it's going to be more than just the clothing. We're going to have a book. Of course, we're going to have a podcast to go with that as well.
So I'm just really the host for that as well.
Yes, I will be the host for that. So we're going to be in a space where we're creating capacity. So I won't be doing as much as the editing for the Food Truck Scholar. I'll still be host, but we're going to hire someone to take the editing off my hands. So it's going to be it's crazy, but fun. And I love it.
That's awesome. And another great tip, actually, you guys, is to start to delegate, right? I mean, some of the things you were doing in order to get everything done, you're going to need to delegate, like the editing, right? So, is there anything else that you would like us to know about your experience for basically a takeaway? Because we're rounding up to the end of this amazing interview.
It's not going to be easy. A lot of people thought I was crazy. And a lot of times I thought I was crazy. But there were moments when I was ready to give up that I would get an email from a listener I never heard of and told me how much the podcast meant to them or the brand itself. So I had to remind myself that even in the moments where I didn't feel great, that it wasn't always about me. So a fantasy pleases you, a dream or a vision will carry a community or the world. So you just have to pick, which one do you have? Do you have a fantasy or do you have a dream?
These are incredible words to live by, right, guys? This is amazing. Ariel, I thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Guys. Yeah, this was super. We've got so many takeaways. For more information about what Ariel is doing, absolutely visit www.thefoodtruckscholar.com. She's on social media. Her hashtags are Food Truck Scholar and TFTS podcast, right? And any other social media I need to tell about? Because I know you're Instagram, Facebook, probably LinkedIn, right?
LinkedIn, most definitely. Both me and the Food Truck Scholar have our pages there. I'm not on Clubhouse as much as I used to, but that's Food Truck Scholar. But if you go to thefoodtruckscholar.com, you will have all of my social media in the top right corner.
And if we know anyone who is a food truckie or trucker, where are they getting your book?
Well, they can get it actually at thefoodtruckscholar.com, and they can get it on Amazon as well.
Awesome. We are so grateful. Thank you for that. And thank you guys for joining us for this. For more information about Women's Council of Realtors and Women's Council of Realtors North Central, you can org. If you had a good time this morning, though, please join us every last Friday of the month for Wake Up with Women's Council. Our webcast is regular, and the next one on March 25th is when we're going to be talking to a guest from Toastmasters International, something I had actually been involved in. Faria has a good friend who's involved in that, and that's a global organization that helps people with public speech and leadership. So stick around for that. We'd love to have you there. I'm Kat Timpson. I'm the treasurer of Women's Council North Central. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thanks to our strap partners, Jimmy Joseph at GRA Rate, and we have also Jana Lally, Goosehead Insurance. We thank you, Dan, for giving us some information about commercial lending, and we hope you guys have an amazing weekend. Thanks.